Good way to put that.
Yeah, sometimes it's like whenever I was a young married man, I was cooking some donuts in my kitchen and the grease caught on fire and I didn't know what to do with it. So I gently picked it up off the stove top and opened up the back door and just threw it in the backyard and my whole backyard lit up like a big light, lit up like firecrackers were going off. Sometimes that happens.
You didn't get any donuts either.
I didn't.
I think today is National Donut Day.
Oh,
I
well,
think there's a proclamation involved with that.
oh,
Uh,
sweet.
it's 7 minutes after 9 o'clock. Pastor Paul Thompson joining us in studio on Pastor's Roundtable this morning. I joked with him yesterday. It's the end table today because
Yeah.
your cohorts are tied up with other issues.
Yeah,
And
they're all over the place and busy today, and we're unable to come. And I called nearly every friend I know, and here I sit by myself.
But you know what? I know a lot of pastors who would like to be speaking about what you're talking about today,
Yeah, yeah.
and so you're representing a lot of voices in the Magic Valley. I do want to point out if you'd like to reach the show today, 208-736-0300, and Bill Colley with you on the program as well until 10 a.m. I First of all, we were originally going to talk Fifth Commandment today, and we're talking about honoring mothers and fathers, but in a sense, there is a relationship to this too, in how we were just talking off air. Nobody ever really has a proclamation honoring those moms and dads who are honoring their marriage vows. They're not straying and they're raising their kids, and those things don't happen. But I said to you off air, and I've said it I think previously this week on air, that I don't have a problem with people getting together for a picnic in City Park
Right.
for whatever organization they have. It's a public park and it's
It,
available for that.
it's
And
part of the beauty of our nation. I mean, anytime you forbid somebody from doing something based on an opinion or a lifestyle, then all of a sudden now we've lost some of the beauty that we are as a nation. And at the same time, we also have to realize we cannot remain silent about things that are sinful actions in before the Lord. So we don't forbid them from doing them, but we certainly have to speak out in it.
and there was a proclamation Monday at the city council meeting, which we talked about with the mayor on the air here Monday. And I think he knew that there might be some controversy surrounding it, but it's a proclamation. I guess it names this Pride Month in the city of Twin Falls. And as I understand it, your belief on this is government probably shouldn't be sanctioning this.
Well, yeah. So there's probably a lot of things that we could talk about that the government has no business sanctioning. Um, One thing that I would argue they should and they ought to lift up the value of the household, the family. That is really a bedrock institution of a flourishing nation. But to give sanctioned approval and even celebration of and instructing the community through the proclamation that this sinful activity ought to be applauded in the community. Uh, we cannot ever think that we're going to be in a flourishing community when we celebrate that which is sinful.
We, though, as a culture, have defined sin down over the last couple of decades, especially the last couple of decades. It's been going on for 50 years, but it's really accelerated since the 1990s. And there are probably a lot of people out there saying, gee, that Pastor Thompson seems like such a nice guy. He's being so mean-spirited because, he's interfering with these people. They love each other, and why should he even be bringing this up?
Yeah, yeah. It is. It will come across as this that they're just being old-fashioned. You're being archaic. Get with the times. Everything's changed, and after all, God's made me like this, and so why shouldn't I celebrate this love that I have? And so there's lots of ways we can look at this. If I were walking by a burning building and people inside of it were burning, and I thought, oh, they don't want me to go in there and disrupt them. It will be rude of me to go in and tell them the house is on fire, and so I just walk on by. Well, the law ought to prosecute me for not loving them enough to go in and disrupt their life.
Well, we've seen this in Florida where you've got a deputy who is now charged
Right.
because he didn't do anything to
Correct. Yeah.
assist in a mass shooting.
The right thing to do is to burst in and say, "Hey, this is not right. This is not helpful. This is not beneficial to you. It's not beneficial to the community here." And so I would put that in the same position here whenever there is a deliberate, intentional activity that is, as described in the Bible, as an abomination before the Lord. It would be actually unloving of me to just walk on by and leave it be and say nothing about it.
We've got a caller looking to join us, and early in the program today, but I think we'll have more than a few voices chiming in. Caller, it's 912, and you're on the air on Pastors Roundtable on KLIX.
Well, if I didn't just hear you right, I apologize. But, mass shooting, the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, he's such a principled man. He, encourages abortion even after the child is born, or murder. But he wants to make sure he saves lives with gun control. When you have leaders who have no logical principles, there's nothing logical about what he says. It's a joke. And one more quick point. This is changing the subject just a second bit, but I'm going to say it. Child pornography arrests are on the rise across America in certain states. It's like the elephant in the room, porn. And I'm telling you, it scares me to death. I'll hang up.
Yeah, I appreciate the caller calling in, and he does expose and show that there is a large discrepancy in how our nation, and I'll bring it down real close to home, our own community, where there's a discrepancy between what we want to see as being friendly, proper, helpful, while at the same time giving promotion to, either by silence or by encouragement, but with words, the abolishing or the abortion is one matter. Where in the city of Twin Falls, as the caller brings up, even in our own city, we really don't want to talk about the fact that babies are being murdered in our own city, and yet everyone wants to talk about the good things that are happening. And so what a discrepancy of reality that is. One is, let's celebrate this sinful activity on one side, and let's say nothing about this other sinful activity, when in fact both of them are atrocious activities. And they happen in our city, and they're being celebrated in our city.
Caller, you're next. You're on the air with Pastor Paul Thompson on KLIX. Go ahead.
Yes, the comment about God made them that way, that I got friends and I've heard that. But if God made them that way, then He made me a bank robber. The thing about us being silent, God tells us we're supposed to be out there saying this is a sin, and we're not supposed to be silent about this.
Yeah. I appreciate that, caller. He brings up a good point that one can't. Their defense for their activity can't be, I was born this way. And, he brings up he's a bank robber. And so it would be unfair for the law to prosecute him if he goes in and breaks into a bank and takes my money. He takes everyone's money. That the law ought to let him go because God made him that way. Well, it's true. He is by all of us with a sin nature to want to act against the nature of God. And so, whether it be homosexual or heterosexual, adultery is a sin against God. Sex outside of the institution in which God's designed it for is an abomination before God. And so a heterosexual man might want to come say, you know what, I can't help myself. God just made me this way. I want to have relations with as many women as possible. Well, it may be true that he has a sin nature that he wants to do that, but society can't let him do that, and God forbids him from doing that.
And I want to thank the caller for chiming in. We could say that anybody, if they drink too much, or if there's any number of things, God made me that way, they could be using that. And the man, as you pointed out, who feels he's got to act on his biological urges. But that's kind of the point, is that we're also supposed to exercise some self-control in life.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a discipline.
And I think that gets ignored. When you say I was born that way, if you can't identify any scientific evidence as such, then that argument doesn't work too well either. I throw that out there.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and I think I've heard it said by others that, if so, let's give the plausibility. If it's possible that there is a genetic uh, component that makes men attracted to men and want to have relationships with men, that doesn't absolutely then make it something that ought to be celebrated and allowed. Just as just stated a few moments ago, if a man has an attraction for a woman, law has limits on what he can do. The Word of God instructs him where his limitations should be. So it should be a disciplined lifestyle. And so for anyone to make the argument, it's a flawed argument because I still have a responsibility before my God. And my God tells me I can't do that activity.
I've got somebody listening on the app this morning. We know her as Glenn, a mutual friend of ours, and that's her shortened name. She says, I am out of town and listening on the phone, so I can't call in. But can you ask the pastor if the mayor made this decision on his own, or did the complete city council vote to have this be called a Gay Pride Month?
Yeah, so I'm not the expert on the actual laws of how a proclamation is made. It is so I'm just expressing my understanding of it. Is that proclamations are from the mayor alone, so it's not a concerted effort of the city council. The proclamations are signed by the mayor, not by the city, and so it's my understanding it's a mayoral proclamation. So there was no vote by the council for this. It was just a proclamation by the mayor.
But I'm going to be guessing that some of those council members probably were glad they weren't asked to vote one way or another.
Right, right. I'm sure they were.
Because political courage sometimes is not always easy to find.
Yeah, and so granted, it puts them in a perplexing situation because they are to serve all citizens, those that would agree with me and those that would disagree with me. And I'm pleased that the city, the responsibility of the city is to serve all of my neighbors and equally as they would me. And so I'm grateful for that. And so I understand the perplexity of the situation. But a proclamation, first of all, has no law binding responsibility to me. So I'm not breaking the law if I don't go along with the proclamation. And nor is someone who adheres to the proclamation a better citizen than one who doesn't. So a proclamation is really more of a publicity issue than it is because it's not at all a binding issue.
We'll take more telephone calls. I've only got about 20 seconds to go until the break, and I know there are other people who want to chime in this morning, so be patient. Pastor Thompson is here until 10 o'clock this morning, so we've got another 40 minutes for those telephone calls, and we're at 65. Pastor's Roundtable and Bill Colley handling the phones on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com, and this is Magic Valley This Morning. Pastor Paul Thompson is with Eastside Baptist Church here in Twin Falls. 22 minutes after 9 o'clock, and you're listening to Pastor's Roundtable on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com with Bill Colley on Magic Valley This Morning, and it's 65. Telephone number if you'd like to reach the pastor, 208-736-0300, 208-736-0300. You realize there's a number of your fellow pastors who will back you on this. There are a number of people in your congregations who will back you on this, but still, there are going to be some people who feel that because it's going to make them uncomfortable, whether they be pastors or even some people in your own churches who would just simply like this thing to go away.
Yeah, I would say yes to everything that you've said there. No doubt. I mean, several pastors I called over the last couple of days to see if they were available to come in today, wanted to come. They're appreciative that we're talking about this in the public arena of the community, but their schedules just wouldn't allow them to come today. And so yes, there is a large population probably of our community that are in agreement that this is a tragedy. And it's too bad that this event or that this proclamation specifically has been made about our city and to the citizens of the city. And so, yes, and then on the other side of that, obviously, perhaps even someone listening right now would be greatly offended that we're speaking against a lifestyle that they've fully embraced. And so it's not an attempt to be unfriendly or unneighborly to someone. It's really this responsibility to guys like me who are pastors, and I would then argue even further to the whole of the Christian community that we speak lovingly and truthfully on these matters. This is a dangerous activity to engage in.
We've got a caller. Caller, you're next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, a couple things. So I normally don't listen to this station, but I read an article yesterday that really caught my attention, and on KLIX, excuse me. And the very first thing that caught my attention was how they referenced that people used to listen to pastors, and that really caught me. That broke my heart because that's part of the contributing problem is people aren't attending church and they're not listening to their pastors. So I commend you, Pastor, for being there today and speaking out on this. I grossly disagree with what the mayor has done. It kind of breaks my heart that you're there alone and that nobody stood up with you. But I have concerns as well. I mean, the commercial that was on the radio before this was for a male enhancement product.
Right.
And it's talking about how she broke up with her boyfriend. So there, right before this, we're condoning premarital sex. It's just such a broad subject. But my big concern is how it will be perceived. I commend you for standing up. It needs to be done. I'm just concerned about the platform being on the radio that it's being done. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, when we do it out of the name of love, because we're commanded to love. And I believe 100% that you have a loving heart and you're doing this out of love. But I'm afraid it's not going to be perceived that way. And there's so many emotions and so many thoughts in myself who's grossly against it, as I'm sure there's so many emotions and so many thoughts for those that's listening right now that's saying, I can't believe that he is even on the air doing this. I can't believe they even give him airtime. So it's just such a broad subject. I hope I conveyed what I was trying to say. So
Sure.
I'll hang up and I'll listen to the responses. Thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, I really appreciate the caller's comments and the fact that I'm here alone. He should not be too dismayed. It's just the way the schedule's worked out with this must be a very busy week for pastors around the valley. And my friends who are normally here with me on Thursdays, Bear and Christopher, they send their greetings along to you, by the way, Bill. But the caller's comments and his thoughts about this, I appreciate, and I think they're widely is the norm or the majority of the comments or the thoughts that most of our neighbors would have, and really, frankly, it is a tragedy, and I'm disappointed that the mayor made a proclamation of such. But it's his prerogative. He is the mayor. And so it puts some ownership back on us as citizens about how careful it is that we give full attention to everyone we elect into public office. Everyone who does that could possibly sit in the seat of a mayor.
Right.
Where we as citizens don't elect our mayor, the council elects the mayor from among themselves. So every member of that city council could potentially be your mayor. So that's why it's important that you pay attention to every single person who runs for public office.
And of course, the caller referenced the male enhancement commercial, and
Right.
I don't have any control over this, but I have spoken before saying, could we? If there's an office far away that just looks at a number on a commercial and says there's a vacancy, put it there. I get the same feeling when I'm watching a show, let's say on Fox or a ball game.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, Frank Thomas, the legendary baseball player, is there selling one of these enhancement formulas. And I'm just glad that, for instance, my daughter is not in the room with me while that comes on.
Right.
We're bombarded by it, and this is and it shows you that change in the culture that we've had. We're bombarded by it, no matter where you go.
Yeah, we are, and I think that even puts some responsibility back again on us as individuals of how much of the advertisement side of life that's going to give influence upon us We can participate in a lot of good things, but the very supporters and the backers of it, even what we're understanding of what's happening in Georgia, where companies, the media industry is deciding because they're pushing forward a real sharp and clear, precise life issue. The state is, and those who want to promote otherwise, they want to pull their money away somewhere else.
I watched a baseball game yesterday. My favorite team was on, and I watched them play, and I didn't know this until after the game. But it was for Pride Month. These baseball clubs they even have baseball caps you can buy in rainbow colors. I got to get to a break soon, so I'll shorten this up. But I didn't know it till I read the post-game story online that there had been a same-sex couple that proposed, and it was part of the ceremony for Pride Month. You take your kid to the ball game,
Right.
and this is what you're exposed to.
It's everywhere.
Used to be just called baseball, and it was a healthy pastime. It's 67. It's 9:30, and you're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. More with Pastor Paul Thompson on Pastors Roundtable on the way. Pastor Paul Thompson joining us in studio on Pastors Roundtable coming up on 9:35. We're at 67 on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. Bill Colley handling the telephones, 208-736-0300, 208-736-0300. And the pastor, I think I can put it this way, and he can correct me if I'm not quite right about this, but I think he is voicing the concerns of a lot of people in the Christian community who don't believe that the city should be involved in a proclamation for Pride Month. And if that's a good way to put that. And I realize, too, that people come to the mayor and they say, we'd like this, almost like they petition him in a way, that they would like something like this done. So he does the proclamations.
Right.
And I don't know if there's if he can reject them. But I heard if somebody came and said we wanted to have a human sacrifice in City Park in a proclamation, he's not going to do that. I'm not trying to.
You would hope not.
Right. I'm not even suggesting that many of these proclamations are similar to that. But
Right.
I wanted to mention that too. 9:36. We've got a caller with us, and caller, you're up next. You're on the air with Paul Thompson, pastor of Eastside Baptist Church in Twin Falls.
Good morning, Bill. Thank you, Pastor Paul, for taking this on and bringing attention to it. The problem we have across the nation is that the church, the leaders of the church, pastors and so on, aren't standing up and defending God's word or bringing attention to sin like what we're trying to do here. And I hope that your lead will move other pastors in our community. I know some couldn't be here today and stuff, but I've been to quite a few of the churches in this valley, and I can tell you that I don't think there will be a lot of support openly on this kind of movement, by this mayor. It's really sad to see this in our community. As many Christian folks as there is in this valley and conservative Christian people, there's really just not a lot of people out there doing anything, let alone vote. Voting these people out like this, showing we don't want to go these kind of directions. I think it was said that they want to make, I think it was our mayor, too, that said he kind of wanted to make Twin Falls the little Boise. I think that was said somewhere in the last couple of years, actually. And this kind of stuff just proves that that is the direction he wants to go. A welcoming city, plus all the other progressive issues that we see in liberal cities that are run by liberals. And so I thank you for standing up, and Bill for giving him a voice, and I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for the call. And listen, I want to make it really clear as well. I pray for my mayor regularly. I attend our city council meetings almost weekly, and it's because I care about my city council members. I greet them whenever I see them in the community. I sit next to them whenever I can. at events, and so I respect. And matter of fact, I've even witnessed our mayor be fair and friendly to others,
Very much.
very much so. Whenever citizens are approaching the city council and requesting, so I appreciate, even though I disagree with him on many probably more moral, ethical, of biblical kinds of things. But I have a lot of respect for how really he's governed the city. I think largely he's done a good job. But I do take big issue with any kind of a proclamation from my city that wants to celebrate that which is opposed to God.
We've got to take a short break. More coming up with Pastor Paul Thompson. It's 9:40, and you're listening to Pastor's Roundtable. Bill Colley handling the phones. We're at 68 on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Pastor Paul Thompson joining us from Eastside Baptist Church here in Twin Falls on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Pastor's Roundtable and Bill Colley handling the telephones on Magic Valley this morning. Hey, before we move on, you can do that. Mine does it all the time too.
I thought I actually
I thought,
silenced it.
I thought it was the trumpet of the Lord for a minute.
That's good. I should get that as my ringtone.
But for people who'd like to know a little bit more about Eastside Baptist Church, where do they find it, and what time are services?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Eastside Baptist Church is located at 204 Eastland Drive North here in Twin Falls, and we gather every Lord's Day, every Sunday morning at 10:30, and on Sunday evenings at 6:30.
I was going to say it's also a Southern Baptist denomination.
Yes, yeah, we voluntarily participate with Southern Baptist Convention. So many times people have an idea of denominations that think that an outside agency governs what we do. In most denominations, that's true, but in Southern Baptist life, the local church is autonomous. So everything we do at our church is governed by the people who attend.
And we've got more than one Southern Baptist church in town, and we've got some Baptist churches you would call evangelical and fundamentalist in town as well.
Yeah.
If you just drive along Eastland Drive, it's Churches Row in Twin Falls. A caller earlier today mentioned how the churches are filled in this city, much more so than many other places. And I took note of that driving down Eastland Drive, just how many parking lots are filled Sunday mornings. And then you look around, this issue of Pride Month, when you sit back and you think about this, you've got evangelicals, fundamentalist Christians in this community. They're not necessarily, they're a little uneasy about Pride Month. You've got LDS community, they're a little uneasy about Pride Month. Officially Roman Catholic Church is uneasy about this. Even the Muslims who've moved here as part of the refugee wave, this is not something that they're going to condone. So as a block in this city, I've got to think that probably, unlike a Boise or a Spokane or a Seattle or a Portland, that overwhelmingly, a lot of people may not feel that they want to be, they don't know if they can speak out about it. But on the other hand, I think that they're silently with you in your particular position on this.
Yeah, I agree, Bill. I think that most of the evangelical community understands with clarity what the Bible teaches about abominations before the Lord, and so obviously we're focused here upon the lesbian, the gay, the bisexual, transgender, the queer, because that's the emphasis that the proclamation from the mayor has put forth. But know this, that the Bible speaks about sins of all kinds, of not just in these that we're speaking of today, and that the listener, that the follower of the Lord Jesus Christ needs to understand that the Lord wants us to walk in righteousness before Him. Even in the book of Psalms, in chapter 34, he says, he's basically saying to the listener, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from deceitful speech. Turn away from evil and do what is good. Seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their cry for help. The face of the Lord is set against those who do evil, and will erase all memory of them from the earth. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears, and He delivers them from all their troubles. I can't think of a citizen in the city of Twin Falls that doesn't have trouble at one time or another, and struggle in one area of sin or another.
Every day. And I say
Every
it most
every
happens to
day.
it happens to me when I drive because I
Yeah,
have thoughts about other drivers every day, I kid you not,
yeah,
that are not very godly.
yeah,
And then I have to seek forgiveness because
yeah.
of that. We have a message here. I wanted to share this. Uh, Comes from a very grisly writer. It says, though Paul is with you alone this morning, grisly being a key here, that Paul is with you alone this morning. He says, know that I stand with Paul on God's truth. Culture does not dictate truth. God does. He is our
Amen.
creator and knows what is right. And he says, holy and good for us. No hatred here, but a love for God and his truth.
Amen.
And he says, signing out for Wolf Point. Um,
Yeah, he's up in Montana right
yeah,
now.
the bear at Wolf Point,
Right,
probably looking at a few fox out the window right now.
right,
Uh,
right.
we have a caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Yes, you guys were talking about the gays and lesbians and all that, saying that it was God made them that way, and so the mayor says, "Okay, we're going to have this here month for them." But what about the child molesters? When are they going to come up and say, "Well, God made me that way"? So therefore, when are they going to take and have a parade for them? And when is it going to stop? That's all I need to say. Bye.
Yeah, I think the logical progression as the caller's making here, there at one level, the argument will be pushed back. Well, no, you can't lump the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer community into the same thing as child molesters. And it's true you can't, but at the same time you also can't assume or we shouldn't elevate one sin as a morally acceptable sin while keeping another sin as a completely unthinkable sin. Because if we turn the clock back, and I know this will be part of the pushback we'll get, is you old timers, you archaic thinkers, you biblical minded people can't get with the times, and that this lesbian and the gay, the bisexual, transgender, queer identity of our current culture should be elevated and celebrated as good and morally right. And no right community would ever think that a child molester should ever have a parade. And I would dare think our mayor's not gonna make a proclamation to celebrate that. I've never had that conversation with him, but I'm certain he wouldn't do that. I would want to say to him, I'm certain you'll never want to do that again. Not because of the backlash you'll get, but because it's morally wrong to do, to celebrate sin.
We do though see how this the change in our culture when it comes to this LGBTQ community is all part of a public relations effort. I as a young reporter, I had to go cover some of these pride parades, and you would see people walking around in city streets on sunny days in g-strings and day glow wigs and face paint, and it looked like a circus act. And what happened was some people involved in that movement said we might be better off in jackets and ties. And so they started doing that. And then the charm offensive began. I have been reading that a lot of the people in that community who think that they were born to have an interest in children are looking at that and saying, well, that's the blueprint for us to use in a public relations effort to change the culture
Yeah.
and say that what we're doing is natural and right.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Bill. And there's an intentional understanding. If you're going to have a positive impact on a community, you have to do it by becoming and sounding and looking much like the conservative people that you live with. And you have a parade in Twin Falls and you dress like that, like as your first descriptions, you will not have a celebrated experience in the city. But you show up as family loving, kid loving, hardworking, conservative, valued, kind of minded people. And next thing you know, the community loves you and they want to accept you and want to celebrate you and promote you. So,
We have another caller, and caller, you're up next. You're on the air on Pastors Roundtable with I almost said Keith because I've had so many.
you've had so many Thompsons today.
Yeah, 3 Thompsons in the course of 4
We
hours.
should have had a family reunion of some kind here.
Pastor Paul Thompson, and caller, you're up next.
Bill, I apologize for calling late, but I thought this was an important day in our history. I'm not sure that you've talked about it already.
Yeah,
I think you
earlier in
should.
the program. Yeah.
I think it's. Have you covered it?
Yep.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Which is another thing to be reminded of. I was sharing this off air with Pastor Thompson. I was living in a city 15 years ago where the mayor decided to make he was convinced by his chief of staff to fly the rainbow flag along with a proclamation about Pride Month. And they ended up doing it on June 14th, which is Flag Day. And a lot of people were a little turned off about that. First of all, Flag Day is an important day. It symbolizes the nation and the like. So we come along to June, and historically, we're dealing with one of the most important days in the history of Western civilization.
Right.
And yet we find that we're still bogged down in talking about these cultural issues that way back in 1944, if you'd said we're going to have a proclamation for Pride Month, people would have looked at you and they would have laughed. I mean,
the National Guard may have showed up and escorted you out of office.
Yeah, that's a good possibility that happens to come along, and it is true that we're living in a culture now that is post-Christian and realistically, in many cases, post-patriotic, and everything that we tried to build in this country, a country that was built, by the way, on people coming here originally for religious liberty,
right,
and to practice their faith. This rewrite of history that we've gone through, it's almost all forgotten now.
Yeah, it really is. And even to the caller's point, it is indeed a day of great memory of an amazing military feat. When you stop and consider what all took place on that day, I think I've read recently that this was a day when boys were men.
Right.
And we're in a day now where many men are still behaving like little boys. And if we could have a day where manhood was once again celebrated in our nation rather than made a mockery of, and womanhood celebrated as a God ordained place rightfully in the community. And right now, through the transgender, the sexual identity confusion that our nation is in, is really degrading both manhood and womanhood.
I was reading a column by Matt Walsh yesterday, who's a former coworker of mine, and he gave you all of the letters that now are actually in that acronym. And LGBTQ is just a beginning. If you follow what they'd like you to say, he jokes the entire alphabet will be used up soon, but it's long. I mean, it's like 12 letters. And then he pointed out, he said that you have corporate America. He said you've got all these other things that go on in the month, and a lot of these during the month of June are related to various diseases and the like that we'd like to eradicate. And he said, nobody talks about those, but corporate America now promotes, they sell rainbow hats and Budweiser beer, which he called alcohol-flavored water, he said, is now selling cups to honor all of these different letters that are in that list. And he's... What the heck has happened?
Right. Even stop and think about that, just the use of the letters. I mean, we use them because before long it takes up all of your time to say every word that's there. But in a marketing component, I'm convinced that they want us to use the letters rather than the words. Because you stop and think, if I just say LGBTQ, I mean, we all know what I'm talking about. But if I say lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, there's no doubt these are things that are abnormal behaviors. They are not part of the natural world. They are perversions of that which is true. And so in a marketing matter alone, I think they would rather us just use letters rather than say the words themselves, because the words are sinful activities.
We have a caller. We'll squeeze a caller in here. We've only got a couple of minutes to go on Pastor's Roundtable. Caller, you're up next on KLIX. Nope. All right. Well, we've got about 2 minutes to go. People hearing this today, and I'm sure you're going to get some additional blowback. One of the reasons, though, I think that you are a pastor is because you expect it. In fact, this is where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, the matter is that whenever truth is proclaimed, and it ought to be proclaimed, and I say by the grace of God, it is proclaimed in the city, and citizens whether they attend a church or not, you ought to rejoice that there are places where truth is spoken in our community. And the pastors who normally are here with me are some of those places, and many others here in the community are faithfully opening up the Word of God, and they're preaching and they're teaching from it. And yes, we'll get pushback because men want to save themselves. They want to look for a path for salvation that doesn't go through the exclusive man, Jesus the Christ, the Son of the living God. And so they don't want to go through Jesus, so they'll push back against anyone who says Jesus is the only way. And so we expect it, and the Bible teaches us and tells us you shouldn't think it's strange, and don't be surprised when it happens, when you speak truth.
I just got to admit that today I learned humility twice, because during the course of the program, two people called me up and said, well, I haven't been listening, but it is June 6th, and you should really talk about D-Day, even though I opened the program and spent a lengthy period of time doing that. And then you realize, okay, not everybody is hanging on every word you say for 4 hours.
Right.
Here's a thought, folks. If you miss a little, you miss a lot. Just passing that along.
That's right.
Next week, we are back to... I think the three of you will be in
Yeah,
studio.
we should all be here next week, Lord willing, and the creek doesn't rise.
Yeah.
We'll all be here.
He just saved me about 3 seconds. And Rush Limbaugh's program is on the way. Pastor Paul Thompson joining us from Eastside Baptist Church this morning on Pastors Roundtable. Baptist Roundtable today, I guess.
Hey, now that would be a great show.
67. It's 9:59.